welcome. You are the genius behind a lot of the marketing stuff, and you helped develop the engineered clarity. Thoughts on today's lesson, Mike?
I think that the biggest thing for me that I found interesting in today's lesson, especially as you're trying to build out your network, is take the people that are already in your network that you're considering inviting to be part of ART or already in it, and determine their personality type so you know how to communicate with that person. I thought that was interesting. I don't know that I do that, so cool. I found that to be interesting.
Nice. Paul, thoughts, questions you have?
I really enjoyed this lesson. It brought a lot of things home for me. So what's kind of interesting, fundamentally, what seems to be the easiest piece, and kind of like Mike, it's a piece I miss all the time, and that is exploring other people's personality types. Kind of taken for granted. We talked about this a long time ago. There are dozens of different personality profiling, and when you start looking at how these personalities tie into the leverage pieces, yep, you got it. Another goosebump moment. So really cool.
Cool. Nicole, questions, thoughts, insights that you have?
Yeah, how do you, in going through the personalities, when we're going through why they do and why they don't do, how do you deal with the internal conflict and the stressors that, say, an analytic amiable may have when working with a group? I know we have a lot of those on my team and with the people I work with. How do you deal with that?
Yeah. I think a lot of times people look at internal conflict as being negative. I look at it as being positive. And so the analytic amiable is going to have conflict between doing things perfect and conflict with people. So often when you're perfect, people are not going to like that. There's going to be conflict. But there's agreement in both of these that, you move slower. So what's weird is people often worry about inner conflict when it's actually the people who have inner conflict shouldn't have it, and the people who don't have the inner conflict should. For example, as a driver analytic personality, I don't have inner conflict about the job getting done and people being happy. I have no inner conflict. It's very simple. Get the job done, people will be happy. Well, that's not entirely true. And so I don't have inner conflict, which gives me the capability to do things fast and perfect and get a whole ton of things done. But I'm not worried about the expressive or the amiable energy, which has held me back at times and hurt me and other people around me in a business setting. Peter, thoughts?
Something there?
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
I think what you just went through and explained really says it. It's hard if you've gone through personality masteries and you understand all this. If you don't have your team, if your team hasn't gone through it, it's extremely difficult to really try to work with it, because once they've gone through it and now you're all on the same playing field and they all understand those four master personalities, then it's a lot easier when you're working with the team to be able to work through those little details, I think.
See, that's a good point. I think that's where a lot of times C-level or managers or top leaders will go through these types of courses and they think, oh, I'm just going to teach my team that. Well, maybe not. And so they don't put their whole team through the course. And so Tom's point about the Personality Masteries course, not just you going through it, but having your entire team go through it together as a team is the most effective in being able to do that. So great point. Peter?
Yeah, look, I don't think there's any course quite like this in any case, but there's no question if you don't understand the four personalities, then you kind of rely on authority and intuition if you're facilitating groups and teams of people. So it does make it very difficult unless you have the clarity that something like this brings to everybody. and then you kind of respect the differences as opposed to people, stand their ground, and you find what you find then is it's hard moving something forward because the conflict is cornered in those four corners. And the way through that, in my experience, not knowing what I know now, has been to either muscle your way through because you have the authority, or facilitate by trying to satisfy the four corners. And if you can do a bit of both, that's how you get things going, practically.
Nice.
Hey, Mark, can I ask Peter a question?
Sure.
Because I just kind of put a thought in my mind. So how do you, if you want to teach something, how do you serve all four masters at the same time? Because there's going to be conflict in their personality.
Right. So having this tool or this course effectively is a lot easier to talk to in hindsight. But when I look back, in at least the corporate structures I was in, then there is elements of these four things in any major project going forward, but not in the way that this is all being presented. So you've got the analytical information on which you're making decisions. You've got the strategy that is which is accommodating the amiable and the expressive and the driver. So those elements are vaguely there as opposed to strategically leveraged. So the authority within the bureaucracy, if you will, cares less about the personalities and more about the formal way of progressing. But when I look back, those four corners, one way or the other, are kind of vaguely covered. If I knew what I knew now, it would be more deliberate and more effective.
Does that help, Paul?
Yeah, perfect.
In a group sitting session where you have all personalities, typically you're going to address the driver frequency first, and because that's big picture, and everybody's okay with the big picture. The driver's really interested. If you don't give them the big picture, they won't go forward. The expressive, they're excited about it. The analytic, like we want details. The amiable is like we want harmony. But you go after the most aggressive frequencies, which are going to be the driver first. Big picture, bottom line, profit, speed, getting ahead. If you don't address them fast, they're gone. Next, you go after the expressive. Because the driver's big picture, you get through the driver probably the fastest of all four personalities because they get it. They're like, I got it. Boom, I'm ready to move on. The expressive brings in the energy, the excitement, the enthusiasm, the fun. So that will start to blend in. And the amiable will feel, the people side. The analytic doesn't like it so much because they're kind of like, come on. You're hyping something. I want to know the details. But they'll tolerate the driver and the expressive. Then once you do that, then you move into the details. Now the driver and the expressive may leave the room, which might be good for everybody. And so the analytic is the third one you go after, and the amiable subconsciously is observing all of the energies of the other three, and if the other three are in harmony, the amiable's good. So if you put it in the order, driver, number 1, expressive, number 2, analytic, number 3, and amiable, number 4, it's amazing how much easier things will be for you.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just reflecting back, and it's been, a decade since I took personality masteries. But when I was relating it to the field that I'm in, real estate, the thing that really struck home to me is when you sit down and ask those 4 simple questions, which are kind of fun to find out where they're kind of at in these 4 personalities. And then in the course, we talked about how, from an agent's perspective, sitting there, what they're trying to do is try to understand which one of these 2 people potentially sitting in front of me are really the ones that are going to make the decision. And how can I gain their trust? But what I came away from that course was by just simply rephrasing some of the questions you may have, you can pick up both personalities, and they'll both think that you really get them. I don't know if that makes sense or not. But to me, that's how I would use it in a business. If I'm sitting in a business meeting, and you understand how each of these four personalities work, how you present to each one of those other three, by just simply changing some of the terminology you use, but still getting the same point across, all of a sudden the other three are saying, okay, I'm on board, let's go make this happen.
See, and that's a great point, Tom. I think that's the thing that maybe is the hardest for a business owner or an executive when they're looking at, the cost of the course itself. It's not that much. I mean, it wouldn't take much productivity increase to pay for it, but they're looking at the time. Well, a lot of times, employees, this is for self-development just as much as it is for corporate. So, they could do it on their own time. Or it's really not that much time, and it would actually save time. So if a business could get a bill every single month for the lost productivity because of poor communication, misunderstandings, misdirection, not being clear on what it is, this one course would help everybody in the room learn how to not only better talk, but how to better listen. Like, this is what the driver's really saying. Oh, this is what the amiables, this is what the analytic or the expressive are saying. And so, as Tom said earlier, the key is to get everybody in your organization to go through this course, because as soon as they do, it takes the mystery out of it. It puts a science behind it, an understanding that we are all in this together, and we're going to approach this in a very different way. But that doesn't mean it's bad, and you don't have the energy pushing against, but you have all four energies coming together, which gives you the maximum leverage. Nice. Rosanna, questions? Go ahead.
I'm sort of reflecting too. When I think of some of the big organizations I've been with, there's no question that certain silos attract certain people. So, when I think manufacturing and production, I think analytical, marketing and sales, expressive and amiable. And it would be really interesting to understand what an organizational structure is based on this, what it could be to be more effective based on this, because within teams or silos of a massive engineering or manufacturing business, there is a preponderance of dominance of analytics. So you get these silos within big organizations that attract analytics or attract drivers that attract expressives, that attract amiables. And then underneath that, there may be more variances between the two. But I think understanding that in an organization so that not only do you load it right, but actually from a strategic corporate top-down, you actually ensure that you're leveraging it right too, because all those different silos, which typically have a dominance of either analytic or expressive or amiable because of their functions, do not, when I look back and consider this, communicate effectively. And some of it is a change of language, like you already talked on. So I think if you're going into a big organization, having some idea about what might exist in terms of the polarization of some of these personality types within an organization would be a good way to present the benefits of top-down, bottom-up of a course like this.
Nice.
If that makes sense to you, but it's sort of
yeah. Yeah. Tom, I know you go ahead.
Something just hit me when Peter was talking about that. I remember there are a number of times, both pre-personality masteries and sad to say this, post-personality masteries, I'd be in a meeting, and you're trying to move something forward, and you come out of there and you know there's one or two people that aren't quite on board with it. So now you've got to have another meeting with each of those folks to try and get them to move back on to the team and understand why they're important to the process. And I know this has happened to me a lot, and I'm sure it's happened to everybody else. Had I really implemented the personality masteries and the ability to talk to each one of these four personalities in the way that I could communicate what I'm asking them to do or drawing information from them so that we can move the whole process forward, would have been far more less time consuming than to have these one-offs.
And that happens all the time.
All the time.
In a big organization, because you get these polarization of silos. Finance department squarely in the analytics. When you sit down to get something done, you got the four personalities from four different parts or divisions are speaking in four different languages.
Well, that's the thing. Like, every time you have a one-off meeting, every time you have to get together again, you're dealing with the symptom. You're not dealing with the core, which is an understanding I am programmed kind of way to see the world. It's not good or bad, but it can be good or could be bad. And when people are taught this at a leadership level, and then every team member, like, I believe that a company would gain so much productivity if they made this part of their onboarding process. Before you step day one in our team, you go through this process and you learn about yourself, and you learn the pros and the cons, and you learn the strengths and the weaknesses, and the pros and cons and strengths and weaknesses of other people, so you can communicate. Hey, Tom.
That's a good idea, Mark. You should write a white paper on that.
Yeah. We should do that. You and I could do that together, Mike.
I'm just saying, that's really a good idea.
Okay. Nice.
To make personality masters part of an onboarding process.
Ah.
Oh, I 100% agree with that.
I mean, that really is a good idea. Of all the things I've heard on the call today, that may be the best idea I've heard.
Done. That's one of the benefits.
And the other thing that I heard with Peter and Tom, and I really appreciate their conversations, but, I think the thing that's, I guess, maybe missing from me because of the sales part, maybe because I'm the driver, I don't know, but, when you're talking to these one-off conversations after a meeting, the part that I find is that you've got to be able to frame that conversation around to what's in it for them. And if you don't know their personality, you don't know how to frame what's in it for them. You just don't.
And see, that's why it's so powerful that I looked at it from the standpoint of sales. You said you're in sales, right?
Right.
So I knew that if I could have gotten those 140,000 agents to understand the personality mastery process, when they had the opportunity to sit in front of a homeowner, be it a couple, a single person, or whatever the relationship may be, and be able to just start that process by saying, I have a fun little question I'd like to ask each one of you to answer. And you ask those four questions. Now you know pretty much where their primary personality is. Now I take my presentation and I go through the process of the 6 questions: outcome, question, listening, see, think, do, and solutions and do. And then I word it such that each of those other 2 people I'm talking to are thinking, my God, this guy really gets me.
Yep, absolutely.
The sell process is simple then.
Well, it is, Tom, and the second part of that, even if you're going into a meeting with somebody you don't know or a prospect you've not met or, whatever, starting the conversation off with the 4 questions relaxes any conversation because it seems silly in a sense. Which one of these 4 is your favorite? It's just
well, I remember a couple of times when just out of the blue, I was with somebody that I was talking about this stuff, and the last one was probably a couple of years ago or so. And I literally picked up the phone and called Mark. Thank God he wasn't busy. And I said, would you just simply talk to this individual and tell him what his personality is? Because I was telling him, I can put you on the phone with this guy, and within 2 minutes he'll be able to nail you down. Oh, no, bull crap, that can't happen. Every single time it has happened, and it just blows them away. That's why of all the things that Mark does, that personality mastery, to me, is the key to the 530 grid and everything else.
So then, Tom, taking that just a step farther, right, just because I think this is a good conversation, in terms of leverage and the program that we're in leverage, then for one of us, sort of a foundation of leverage or a cornerstone we should be laying in that is making sure that we're skilled in the personality masters. And if you're not, that could be a secondary program that we need to probably get off into and figure out. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's the primary program. If you can understand that, all the rest of this stuff really kind of falls into place.
Okay. So just from your opinion, sort of as an advisor or an ARP coach or ART coach, whatever this is, then you think Personality Masters is the foundation you have to lay down?
I think so, yes.
What do you think, Peter?
I do, but I haven't done it. I've just heard a lot about it.
Well, okay. I'm just asking the questions, okay? And Mark, I mean, you're sort of the overall guru. What do you think? I mean, this is a serious question.
Yeah, I think that once somebody understands the personalities, like it's like a map, like the periodic tables. It's like the map to everything, and all of a sudden people start making sense. And when people start making sense, like, oh, I get it. I get why I am the way I am. I get why my wife is, my kids. I get why my friends and family, coworkers, my clients. When we get why people are the way they are, it just makes life more fun. It makes things make sense. It helps things to move, like the engine to run a lot smoother. So I think it's the foundation. DNA for People is the foundation for everything else in life.
Interesting.
Yeah. Tom and Peter, thanks for the extra time. I know you guys got to run, so I appreciate it. Next week, we're going to be finishing up. It's going to be the results, and there's going to be some surprises on that lesson. So go through that lesson because it's going to be interesting. There's some things that we discovered in the first 6 lessons here that are going to be incorporated in the last one. I think it's like a grand finale. And it's not the end, but it's the beginning of another whole dimension, actually what's called a quantum thinking, quantum leap. So there's dimensional jumps, but then there's quantum jumps. We're going to be introducing that, in the next lesson too. So for those that need to take off, feel free to do so. Yeah, go ahead.
One question, Mark, what's the cost of Personality Mastery?
I think it's less than $500, I think. Yeah, it's like a little less than 500, I believe.
And could a company buy a license to that, Mark?
Life Masteries Institute, they're a nonprofit organization, so 501c3. And so, if you connect with your art buddy or you call the numbers, they can put you in contact with Life Masteries Institute, and, they can give you all the details of, how you can do it for your whole team and all that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
So, all right, Rosanna, did you have anything?
I was just thinking that, the personality being the amiable is, shall I say that you say the most controlling. I beg to differ, but that's okay. Anyway, even if it were most controlling, how would you take that control and use it to the best benefit for those that are involved?
Absolutely. Great question. So in business or in organizations, there's a huge need for money. Like people you got to pay your bills. And so the amiable kind of naturally is the chameleon personality. So they feel the energy of the different personalities. But I think the amiable being humble, and they act humble, like they use words that convey humility. Like, I don't know that much, and, I'm not that nice, and this and this and this. So they use words that convey humility, which is one reason they gain so much leverage. So the amiable probably is the most natural of all four personalities at gaining leverage. The driver probably has the hardest time because they're so direct with people. And if you're direct with people and tell people exactly what you think of them, it's hard to gain leverage because they don't like you. The expressive, you know exactly kind of where they at, so it can be hard for them to have leverage. The analytic, again, is very obvious often who they are. So I think the amiable truly being humble, not using words of humility and saying, when I'm helping someone, when I think I'm helping them, I might actually be hurting them. And so having that recognition that I am not the nicest person, I'm not the kindest person, and they often move things without even realizing they're moving them. If you have high turnover in an organization, it's typically for one of two reasons that both connect back into the amiable. And one is you don't have amiables, and if you don't have amiables, they're the peacemaker. They're the ones that often create the connection. So when a driver says something to an analytic, the analytic gets ticked, hurt, angry, upset. The amiable will jump in and say, this is what the driver meant. And they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Or the expressive and the analytic, when the analytic says, how's that idea going to work? The expressive hears, you think my idea is stupid. The amiable jumps in and says, no, that's not what they were saying. What they were saying is they're concerned about, this and this and this. And so the amiable is often the translator between the three other personalities. They're a natural chameleon, natural connector of those things. So one is a company won't have amiables to do that, or two is you have a bitter amiable. And a bitter amiable is like a poison. I can't tell you how many times all over the world I've gone into companies and they have high turnover and they have an amiable that's bitter there. And if you have a bitter amiable and they don't even know it, like poison, they'll destroy an entire organization, because what they'll do is they'll go ahead and subvert leadership or subvert the other personalities, and almost without even realizing it. They'll say, did you hear what, Mark said? I'm sure he didn't mean that, but he did say it. Or, did you hear what Tom said? I wonder if he meant this. So what they do is they subtly move people without ever even knowing they're moving, and they're hurting other people without even recognizing they're hurting. So the amiable understanding the massive power that they have, and then being very cautious and understanding of that power and sensitive to realize, I could be using the power improperly, is, I think, probably the first step. Does that help, Rosanna?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. Jill, any questions, thoughts you had? Elise, any questions, thoughts you had?
Yeah, I actually had a question for Tom, which I don't know if he is still on.
He had to take off. I can give it a best shot, and we can pick it up next week with him again.
Okay, that would be great. So he had talked in the past about determining your intention prior to making calls or having an appointment with someone. And I think that I kind of understand what he meant, but maybe not fully. So I just wanted, I guess, a little bit more feedback on it.
Sure, for sure we'll want to get Tom's feedback, so we'll want to pick that up the next time with him. He's talked about that a lot when I've been around, so I'm somewhat pretty familiar with what he's saying. And so always having a goal of what's the intention of the call. Do you want to get another call? Do you want to go ahead and schedule an appointment? Do you want to close the sale? Do you want to get to the decision maker? Do you want to find out who the influences are? Do you want to find out what their problems are? What is the purpose of the call, and having tremendous intentionality of that purpose? And then also, is it the highest purpose possible? And so getting more information, that's a purpose, but that's not a higher purpose like of closing the sale or getting the appointment to get the sale, and being able to do it. Paul might have some insight on that too. I don't know. Paul, I know you're a guru in sales. Any thoughts on intention of the call?
That's kind of like the whole setup thing, and it's missed probably as much as personality, and that's what is the objective, and did I achieve my objective? And it doesn't necessarily mean closing the sale it could be advancing the sale. So do I want to schedule, follow-up meeting with the decision makers? Do I need to, set up a training? So whatever that next follow-up step, but you have to have an objective on the initial call, or you're just kind of hanging out and wish selling. That's not a very good model.
Nice. But yeah, Elise, so that's kind of what I've heard Tom share, but for sure we'll want to go ahead and check with Tom. Anyone else have any other thoughts or questions on today's lesson and moving forward? And we have one more in the course. Any other questions? All right, so again, if you're listening to the rebroadcast of this, connect with your art mentor. That's who you think you're going to gain the most benefit from, but actually it's your art buddies, your 2 art buddies. You reach out to them and you help them to connect what's their purpose for going through the course. And if they're total strangers and you have no idea who they are, call and introduce yourself. If you have no idea how they're going to bring benefit to you, one of the best ways to gain leverage is to care for other people. When you care for people that you have nothing to gain from, it purifies your intention. And all of a sudden you start finding that, wow, when I care for people, it helps me gain leverage. It helps me to make an impact. Any questions, connect with the individual who invited you, your art mentor, or you can call toll-free 888-230-2300. That's 888-230-2300. Or if you're calling in outside the U.S., you can call the U.S.-based number, 630-393-9909. That's 630-393-9909. And always remember, we can accomplish so much more together than we ever could on our own. God bless. Have a great day. Bye-bye.